The night my brother sold my house out from under me, the rain came sideways like punishment. My name is Lena Ward. This is my story. I used to believe that family was the one thing immune to market forces, that blood wasn't something you could refinance. Then came the foreclosure letter with my name on it, but his signature, a ghost of trust turned into ink on paper, the kind that bleeds through envelopes and memories. The house was small, an old 2-bedroom bungalow on the edge of Portland's east side, where the rent had doubled and the coffee got pretentious. I'd bought it with my inheritance from Mom, thinking it was a beginning. It became my prison, my identity, and then my loss. It started with his voice over FaceTime, the ring light shining on his too white smile. He said things like, "Don't worry, I'm helping, and this is temporary, and you'll thank me when your credit rebounds." But he didn't mean credit like FICO. He meant credibility, control, the hierarchy of who gets to say the word ours. He was my older brother, Nathan. He'd studied finance and liked to talk about leveraging assets, which was his way of justifying emotional theft. When Mom died, he became executor of the estate. I didn't fight it. Grief makes you slow, compliant, eager to believe someone else can handle the hard parts. For months after the funeral, I lived half awake in that bungalow. The blinds tilted open like uncertain eyes. The morning smelled of mildew and cold brew. I scrolled Zillow obsessively, comparing what my neighborhood used to cost versus now, as if numbers could hold the shape of loss. Nathan offered to help with paperwork, property taxes, refinancing, insurance. He asked for my signature on something to make things smoother with the bank. I signed, distracted, still wearing Mom's old cardigan that smelled like lavender and regret. By the time I realized what I'd signed, the title had been transferred. He'd used the house as collateral for one of his projects, a startup app that tracked emotional spending, irony incarnate. And then, one Monday morning, a realtor's lockbox appeared on my doorknob. He took the house, but he hasn't taken the story. That sentence became a pulse in my head, rhythmic, defiant. It was the only thing I owned that couldn't be repossessed. I slept in my car for 3 nights behind a Safeway. I watched families pushing carts through rain, their faces lit by fluorescent aisles, while I tried to warm soup on a dashboard heater vent. My phone buzzed with texts from Nathan. It's not personal, just logistics. Every betrayal in America has a spreadsheet behind it. I went to work, a cubicle at a law firm that handled eviction cases, the bitter symmetry of it all not lost on me. I spent days typing notices that ended people's leases, then nights staring at my reflection in a dark phone screen. The thing about being wronged is that it makes you see the whole country differently. Billboards looked like lies. Instagram captions like confessions. Even kindness felt like credit with interest. When I saw Nathan's face on LinkedIn, smiling in front of a glass office with the caption, "Building Futures," something in me snapped. That was the first night I started writing notes, not to him, but to myself. Notes about leverage, about equity, about the way stories themselves can be currency. That's when planning began, even if I didn't call it that yet. There's a peculiar quiet that comes after betrayal. Not peace, not acceptance, but a cold, metallic silence that rings in your chest like feedback from an unplugged mic. I lived in that silence for months. I rented a room in a stranger's house, a widow named Diane who collected angel figurines and drank Diet Coke for breakfast. My belongings fit into 3 boxes and 1 duffel. The rest had been sold by the bank or misplaced during the transfer. I'd gone from homeowner to subletter, from Lena with the craftsman on Hawthorne to Lena, room 2B. Every morning I drove past my old street just to see the house. New people lived there now, a couple with a golden retriever and matching Teslas. They'd painted the porch blue and hung wind chimes. I hated them for existing inside my past. But hate is clarifying. It burns away the confusion until only purpose remains. I made a list. At the top in capital letters, "Get everything back." At first, I didn't know what that meant. Money? Justice? Pride? Maybe all of it. Maybe something worse. Nathan had always been the golden child, the one who understood how the world works. When I was still in art school, he was already flipping condos and using phrases like capital gains while I painted self-portraits with expired gouache. Our parents believed him because confidence looks like competence until it ruins you. But this time, he'd left a trail. I had something he didn't think I'd understand. Access. Working at the law firm had its perks. The partners didn't notice the paralegal in the corner who stayed late, sorting case files. They didn't notice me studying the way they built arguments, the way documentation could twist truth into something that looked lawful. I started with public records, his LLC filings, the property deeds, the loan agreements. I used every free search database I could find, every backdoor of bureaucracy. He had 3 shell companies, 2 bank accounts under different names, and a co-founder who looked like she could be seduced by empathy or ambition, whichever came cheaper. At night, I'd sit in my car outside his office downtown, watching the light in his window flicker. Sometimes he was on calls, pacing with that same smug posture he'd used at Mom's funeral, hands clasped behind his back, pretending to grieve while calculating assets. One night, I caught sight of his reflection in the glass, and mine, layered faintly over his, like a ghost over a man. I whispered to the reflection, "You're not smarter than me." I started small. Anonymous posts on forums where investors whispered secrets about each other. I leaked just enough about his app's data practices, all true, just unconfirmed, to make people nervous. Next came the social side. I created a fake Instagram account under the name @Emotional Index, a supposed former employee turned whistleblower. It took only 2 posts, screenshots from an internal doc I'd found in the filings, for the comments to explode. In a week, his startup's trust score tanked. His investors went silent. The office lights stayed on later and later, but the windows looked emptier. And yet, I didn't feel better. I wanted to see him break. Diane, my landlady, started noticing the hours I kept. She'd knock softly and ask if I was seeing anyone. I told her no. But that wasn't true. I was seeing Nathan everywhere. His face in ads, his tone in podcasts, his name in articles about young disruptors. It was like living inside the echo of someone else's victory speech. So I took a week off work. Mental health leave, I said. In reality, it was reconnaissance. I flew to San Francisco, where his co-founder, Marissa, lived. I attended one of her networking talks, Women in FinTech. She was sharp, confident, maybe a little lonely. Afterward, I approached her with a smile and a fake business card. I told her I was writing a feature about ethical startups. I said I admired her. People like hearing that. She invited me for coffee. Over oat lattes in a noisy cafe, she told me how Nathan had been acting distant, how she was worried about his decisions, how the app wasn't scaling. She used all the buzzwords of disappointment. I listened, nodding, letting empathy disguise intent. By the end of the hour, I had everything I needed. Her frustration, her trust, and a copy of a slide deck she said was internal only. It contained data they'd mined from users without consent, the kind of breach that could end a company. I didn't leak it right away. No. I wanted him to feel the shadow first, to sense the ground softening before it collapsed. I returned to Portland and watched as the online chatter grew, anonymous Reddit threads, Twitter speculation, LinkedIn silence, investors pulling out one by one. The night before the crash, he called me. My real phone, not a burner. His voice cracked. "Lena, I think someone's trying to ruin me." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said softly, "Maybe it's karma." He paused. Then the question that split me open, "Are you happy now?" I wanted to say yes, but the truth was heavier. Not yet. I hung up before he could answer. Outside, rain started to fall, the kind that sounds like typing on rooftops. I sat by the window and whispered again, almost tenderly, "He took the house, but he hasn't taken the story." This time it didn't sound like defiance. It sounded like prophecy. I started waking before dawn, not from guilt, but focus. The mornings in Portland were cold and bright, all pale sky and humming street lamps. The world felt newly made, raw, like anything could be rewritten if you started early enough. Nathan's company, Emovest, was unraveling faster than even I'd planned. Leaks begat leaks. Screenshots, internal chats, regulatory warnings. The story grew legs on Reddit, then Twitter, then Bloomberg. By week's end, their investors had pulled funding and the SEC had opened an inquiry. But ruin alone wasn't enough. I wanted exposure, not just for him, but for what he represented. That glossy, self-righteous capitalism that cloaks itself in mindfulness. So I built a dossier, a story that told itself. All those years watching the lawyers at my firm twist narratives came in handy. I gathered the filings, the investor memos, the user complaints. I wrote an anonymous submission to ProPublica, threading everything into a single arc, a startup that monetized people's emotions while lying about it. I didn't mention his name at first, just the company. But when the journalist called for verification, I let it slip. Once. Calmly, like I was reciting weather. When the piece published, it went viral before lunch. The empathy scam, how a Portland startup sold your feelings. His face was in the header photo. I sat at my desk in the law office, coffee cooling beside me, and watched the traffic rise. Thousands of retweets, think pieces, YouTubers explaining what went wrong. It was brutal, beautiful, terrifying. By nightfall, his accounts were locked. His co-founder, Marissa, deleted everything. His investors ghosted him. He vanished from LinkedIn. And yet I couldn't stop refreshing the news. The dopamine hit of destruction is addictive. When he finally called again, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity is its own kind of hunger. "Lena," he said, his voice hollow, "what did you do?" I said, "What you taught me." I leveraged. There was silence, then the sound of him exhaling, long like he was deflating. "You always were dramatic," he said. "You always were cruel," I replied. He laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. The kind that sounds like a man realizing he's not the main character anymore. When the call ended, I sat staring at the wall. My reflection in the blank TV screen looked calm, almost serene. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt thin. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. People from the office congratulated me on the big scoop, not knowing it was me. Friends sent links. My old house, his collateral, went back on the market, foreclosed again. I drove there once more, parked across the street. The porch paint was peeling, the wind chimes gone. For a moment, I thought of buying it back. But what would that prove? That I'd turned into him, measuring victory in property lines? No. My revenge was bigger than the deed. It was erasure. He would never recover his narrative. Still, I needed to see him fall completely. So I attended the investor arbitration hearing, disguised as a journalist. A mask of glasses and quiet confidence. Nathan walked in wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to Mom's funeral. His hair was thinner, his smile gone. He didn't see me. He saw the cameras, the judge, the papers that named him negligent, reckless, deceitful. When the verdict came, personal bankruptcy, asset seizure, lifetime ban from fiduciary work, he flinched. For the first time in our lives, I saw him small. I should have felt peace, but revenge doesn't heal, it mutates. After the hearing, I followed him outside. He stood by the curb, phone dead, waiting for a cab that didn't come. The rain started again, slow, heavy drops that darkened his suit. I almost walked up to him. Almost. Instead, I whispered to the air, "He took the house, but I've taken the story." It came out different this time. Bitter, hollow, like something spoiled by its own success. He looked up suddenly as if he'd heard me, but there was no one there. Only traffic. Only Portland, damp and gray, swallowing us both. That night I couldn't sleep. I dreamt of Mom, her voice calling from the kitchen, the sound of a kettle. In the dream, she said, "Lena, you've mistaken revenge for repair." When I woke, my chest hurt, the kind of ache that feels old, inherited. I opened my laptop and reread everything, the article, the emails, the threads. The destruction was complete. He was gone, and yet somehow he still lived inside me. The silence afterward felt biblical. There are different kinds of quiet. The soft hush after snow, the humming lull of freeway nights, and the kind that follows ruin. The last one is the loudest. It's like your body keeps bracing for another blow that never comes. Months passed. Portland shifted seasons. Cherry blossoms, drizzle, wildfire smoke. I moved out of Diane's house into a small studio above a laundromat. The rent was absurd. The walls thin, but it was mine. I hung blackout curtains and taped my own name on the mailbox in block letters. Ownership in America comes in scraps now. Leases, usernames, fragments of data. But I took it. Nathan didn't contact me again. His bankruptcy made local news. His photo appeared in a sidebar with the caption, "Former CEO faces federal charges." People forgot quickly. The internet devours scandals like fast food, hot outrage, then silence. I thought that would free me. It didn't, because revenge is recursive. It circles back. Every victory contains the shape of what you destroyed. I tried to start over. New job, smaller law firm, different faces. I worked in consumer protection now, writing briefs about predatory lending. The poetic irony wasn't lost on me. I told myself I was doing good, but at night I still scrolled through old messages, reread old files, as if the wound needed maintenance. Sometimes I'd catch myself typing his name into search bars. Not to gloat, to confirm he was still gone, as if disappearance required evidence. I saw him once, unexpectedly, 6 months after the trial. I was in a grocery store, the kind with overpriced produce and mood lighting. He was at the end of the aisle, thinner, wearing a thrifted coat. He looked older than our father ever got to be. He saw me. For a heartbeat, we both froze. Then he smiled, not smug, not cruel, just tired. He said quietly, "You got what you wanted." I said, "Did I?" He nodded, as if to say that was answer enough. Then he walked away, leaving his basket half full. I stood there for a long time, staring at the lemons he dropped into it. They rolled slowly against the linoleum, bright as small suns. That night, I cried for the first time in a year. Not out of guilt, out of exhaustion, out of recognition that I'd spent everything, money, time, conscience, on making someone else's loss my identity. The world outside went on. Rent rose. Protests came and went. News cycles spun. America kept churning, hungry and loud. I went to work, paid bills, made small talk about TV shows I didn't watch. One evening, I walked past my old house again. It was empty, for sale sign leaning in the yard, the grass dead from neglect. I parked across the street, watched the wind stir the porch dust. Through the window, I could see the corner of the living room where Mom's piano once sat, before Nathan sold it, before I let him. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just distance. The house wasn't a symbol anymore. It was wood, paint, drywall. The story had moved on. I whispered, to no one in particular. He took the house, but he hasn't taken the story. The line still lived in me, but softer now, less a battle cry, more a benediction. I turned away before the realtor came. Back home, I opened my laptop and began to write. Not legal briefs, not revenge notes, a memoir. About inheritance, debt, and the way betrayal mutates inside families like a hereditary disease. I wrote about the quiet wars between siblings, about grief shaped by capitalism, about what it means to lose your home twice, once to paperwork, once to pride. It wasn't confession, it was release. When the words started to make sense, I realized something. Stories are houses too. You build them, inhabit them, haunt them, and unlike property, they can't be foreclosed. The last line I wrote that night was simple. In the end, every revenge becomes a mirror, and every mirror, eventually, shows you home.